Well, welcome everyone. The Art of the Ask, prompting AI for proposal success. Very, very excited for all of you to be joining us today. The goal for our session, very, very simple. We're trying to move you from trial and error when prompting to a much more structured, much more confident approach when you are prompting. How will we do that? Well, Marcia and I were going to share some best practices, some practical steps that you can apply when writing these effective prompts within the responsive AI ecosystem. What is the AI ecosystem? Great question. So we'll be talking about Ask, we'll be talking about AI Assistant, Agent Studio, and of course, MCP servers, which we're very excited about. But before we get into that, let's do some general intros by way of introduction. My name is Philip Villegas. Thank you. I couldn't switch it, so thanks. By way of introduction, my name is Phil Villegas. I'm a learning experience designer here at Responsive. I am one of the many sets of hands behind Responsive Academy. If you're a new user or just someone interested in best practices, more strategic approaches to Responsive Academy will be your best friend. But I'm not by myself. I'm your opening act, the main event. We have Marcia on the call. Marcia, good morning. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Phil. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. My name is Marcia Stay. For those of you who have not joined Coffee Chats before, I help run these live events as well as make on-demand courses with Phil and the rest of our amazing team and certifications, which exciting announcement about that in a little bit. We are also not alone. We are joined by our boss, Stephen Peterson, the founder of the Academy. He will be on the back end answering all of your questions. So please keep him off our backs and keep him busy and ask him questions as we're talking today. He will be sure to get those answered for you.
I love it. So good. Before we start, let's just a very clear baseline so we're all looking at the same thing together. So what is prompting? Prompting, all it really is we're telling AI what to do, whether that is instruction, whether that's asking AI a question, a request. The common misconception here, I'm guilty of it. I think we're all honest. Hopefully it's not just me. I argue with AI all the time, like far too much than I care to admit. It's because of misconception, which is if I write a perfect prompt, AI will magically know all the context, everything that I'm trying to get across. No, that's not the case. So AI output, especially when we're thinking in the context of responsive, there's three key things to remember. One, your source content. We've talked about this many times before. If you've been on our coffee chats, you've definitely heard this, but it's worth repeating. Garbage in, garbage out. If it's not good content coming in, not going to be good content coming out. Secondly, how's your content narrowed down? Or better yet, how's it structured? How's your content library organized? All these are things that you should be considering when you're prompting or maybe getting less than ideal prompting results. Lastly, the third piece is prompting. So how are you asking these questions? What are you asking AI? What are you asking Ask? So on. So prompting, yes, we are simply just asking a question, but within responsive, we're really trying to guide the AI to create these better answers from your company's trusted content. To go one level deeper, though, is mastering responsive AI. If you're on this call, that's your objective, that's your goal. First off, give yourself some grace. Why? Prompting, it's a skill. Furthermore, it's a skill that's advancing over time. I don't know if any of you watched the Google keynote yesterday of all the latest and greatest coming with Gemini. It's insane. We live in the future. I say all of that because as all the new updates and things come out, these best practices will evolve and get better, but it's a journey. We'll all be prompting pros at some point. So just don't try to boil the ocean right out of the gate. Secondly, prompting, it's only one part of the formula. So like I just said, it's going to rely on, garbage in, garbage out. How's your content? How's it structured? So on and so forth. It's an AI tricycle is my kind of, little analogy here. Why? Because if I don't have good content in my content library, if it's not organized really, really well, I have a tricycle that has two flat tires. You need all three tires to be moving at the same pace. Going off that analogy even further, I'm also the driver. So yes, AI, it's amazing. It's an incredible tool that will help our workflows get even better and better and better. It's a really, really fast car, a really, really fast tricycle, but I'm still the driver. So you are still in charge of all that organization, how you're prompting, so on and so forth. But going back to kind of help everything get in one place to help, because we don't want to just tell you everything. We want to give you some practical steps. This is Responsive Academy. We do have the AI Content Manager badge. So I'm going to drop it in the ticker. So it's going to come on the screen right now. Everyone who's on this call, click that. It'll open another window, do it later. But this will, one, get you a badge, which is always fun because you can put it on LinkedIn and we're going to, screaming from the rooftops and highlight you as much as we can. Secondly, it's going to help you get all these things ready. So again, from really, really good prompting, your content library needs to be set up really, really well. Your AI Content Manager badge is very practical steps for you to get that started. And yeah, so be sure to do that. Don't do it right now though, because you'll want to pay attention to all this great content. We can go to the next slide. Just a very simple formula. Yes, Marcia is going to go through some awesome specific examples very, very soon. And we defined what prompting is, but to go again, just a very simple formula, again, ideally, so you can kind of remember these things. Prompting is just deciding what question you want answered. Secondly, how would you like your answer to look? The level of detail, yes, that's going to vary based on the tools that we're going to be using, but ultimately that simple formula will work. The analogy, again, I'm a metaphor person, is you can't be mad at the waiter if you don't give them your order. So if I say, hey, I want a steak, awesome, but I get on my plate a T-bone when I wanted a ribeye, and it's well done, I wanted it medium rare. You get my point. You just need to be clear with the direction. Or more practically, because I'm talking to proposal managers, if it's like directing a junior proposal writer. So we can go to the next slide. If we're not giving clear instructions, it's not going to be a good time. So to help with that, when in doubt, use COAST. COAST is a very simple acronym. So again, using that example, I have a very junior, wide-eyed freshman junior proposal on my team. And my question then is say, hey, I need help answering this RFP. If I say that, good luck, because one, the output's probably not going to be great. But if I use the COAST method, it's going to be a lot more clear. So context, what's the context? Well, hey, a customer is asking about our onboarding process for an RFP. Great. Objective, create a very clear draft. Audience, it's for a enterprise IT buyer. Style, hey, write it short, write it professional. And then the tone, I want you to be confident. I want you to be helpful and avoid jargon. So all these things, again, meant to kind of help you when you are considering these prompts. So be nice to your junior writers, be nice to your AI, give clear direction. Lastly, before I pass it off to Marcia, who's going to walk us through some more things, we created this prompting scale. So from simple to advanced. As Marcia walks through the examples, she will reference this prompting scale. I know it looks a little intense. Don't worry. If you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm on the simple end, by the end of the call, you'll be more on the advanced end. So don't worry. Our whole point here, it's not to intimidate. It's just to set expectation. So the amount of time. So if it's simple, it's not going to take a lot of time. Intermediate, a little bit of time. Advanced, maybe lock in, buckle up, because you may be at your computer for a little bit longer. But with that, Marcia, I'll let you take it away and walk through all these examples.
Thank you so much, Phil, for that breakdown of prompting. And thank you, Mimi, for grabbing a new link for the AI Content Manager badge. If you still can't access it, let us know. We want all of you to get badged.
Oh, thank you.
Wait a minute before you take the quiz, because we're going to go over a lot of really good content today. But to kind of set the stage of where we'll start talking about prompting and responsive with AI specifically, it's been about a year since we've hosted our first prompting session. Now, a lot of the core concepts of prompting haven't really changed. So like what Phil just talked about, the simple prompting formula, asking, what do I need to know? How do I need to know it? That's still really going to drive and guide how we prompt these various tools in responsive. And that co-structure is exactly what we covered last time. That hasn't changed either. So the foundational principles of prompting is primarily the same. What has changed a lot in the past year is our ecosystem. We now have so many places where you can apply prompts, and you'll apply them differently based on what you're trying to garner from them. So Ask an AI assistant, those two things were around last year when we held a similar session, but AI agents and the MCP server or the ChatGPT, Claude, and Copilot, those weren't available. So we're going to slowly kind of walk through the level of prompting needed in order to engage these tools and some tips and tricks to make sure that your output is going to work wherever you're trying to use it. So we'll start with Ask. And the reason we're starting with Ask is because it's kind of that simplest level of prompting, and it's also everywhere. It's the lowest barrier to entry to access. To access Ask, all you have to do is log into Responsive, and you have a nice little button on every single page to open it up. Or you can download an app for Ask that's directly on your desktop. You can access it there. And it also lives in Word and Excel lookup now. So if you're not familiar with what lookup is, it's essentially a plugin tool that exists in other places too, but for the sake of Ask, in Word and Excel. And you can open it up, and it essentially brings your content library into whatever document you're working on, which is particularly helpful if you have a document that's maybe not worth necessarily plugging into Responsive. It's just a one-person job that needs to get done, or maybe it's a complicated table, something of that nature. That's where lookup is going to come in handy. And we've added Ask to that to make it even more seamless. So previously it worked like the recommendations engine, where you could just, grab a response based on the question that existed from your content library. Now there's that added layer of Ask in it, so you can pull AI with it. With that said, using Ask is fairly simple because it's essentially doing exactly what we said in the first slide, that prompting formula. All you're doing is asking it a question. The interface is super intuitive because you ask the question and then it's a chat feature. So you don't necessarily have to worry about how do I want this answer to come back, because what you'll do is ask the question. If you don't like what you see, then you can say, write it for me this way, or make this easier to read, something like that. That's why we've said that Ask is a simple prompting skill level. You really don't have to think about the prompting you're doing, but you are effectively prompting when you are engaging with Ask by asking those questions and then asking it to update the response for you. I'll also mention really quickly, there's a lot of text on all of the slides I'm covering today, which I know is a bit much. I went ahead and created a document in the Docs tab. It should be the very last document in there. It just has notes. Everything that's on the slide exists in that document. So if you want to follow along and take notes, you can. You'll also have this deck available to you either from the Docs tab or after the fact to revisit everything. So just keep that in mind if you're like, wow, this is a lot of information. It is, but it's good information. You have those resources available. Back to Ask. The examples I provided here are just ones that you might want to use if you're using Ask. So if you have end users that are engaging with Ask, then they're likely just trying to find quick responses from the content library without having to dive into the content library and search for those answers. So that's really effectively what you're doing with Ask. Now we've pulled together some FAQs about it, primarily about lookup, which I'm having a hard time reading the chat, but I can see that there are some questions about lookup in there already. But what does Ask in Word and Excel do? It's really just using AI to generate those answers. It does operate a little bit more like AI Assistant, which I'll talk about in a moment, or AI Draft, where it's not necessarily just doing a chat interface, but it's effectively doing the same, ask the question, what do you want? And then you can tailor it from there. If you have lookup and you haven't accessed it for a while and you're like, whoa, there's AI in there. What if I want my old version? You can still access it. There's still the classic experience on there. So don't worry about that. You can go back and forth. If you're scratching your head and you are like, you keep saying the word lookup, I've never heard of that before. Do I have access? Please reach out to your CSM. They can tell you if you have access to it. Now, the other big question that typically comes up with Ask is, okay, if we now have the MCP connector, which I'll talk about in a few more slides, like ChatGPT, why would I use Ask anymore? Is that replacing Ask? When should I use the respective tools? And that is a great question. The honest answer is you should use whichever tool is most convenient for you. If you're already working within Responsive and it's easy to click on that Ask button, Or if you have it as part of your desktop applications, then that might be the easiest way to get answers as quickly as possible. If you're working on a project in ChatGPT, Claude, or Copilot, then you might already be there and you might just want to use your company knowledge to get an answer there as well. So it's really a dealer's choice. It's whichever is the most easiest and convenient for you. Another thing to consider, however, is that Ask is only limited to the knowledge that you give it. So when Ask is searching for responses for you, it's looking through your curated content library. If you've added external sources or a SharePoint or Google Drive site, it'll look there too. But you do have a more refined search and you are able to filter with Ask. So if that's something that's important to you in your search, or if that's something that's important for you when you're sharing knowledge and AI tools with your team, you may want to consider that as a factor of whether or not we're encouraging users to use Ask versus MCP connectors. Our final little tip here for Ask and prompting is we've added a little suggested prompt at the bottom of Ask. If you're in the little Ask window, it says suggested prompts. Feel free to use that. That's really just looking through your content library and giving suggestions of questions you can ask it based on what exists, things that might get asked frequently. So that's there for you. If you're like, I don't even know where to begin, you can use those as little tools to get you started with, okay, what can I actually ask this thing and get responses on?
Hey, Marcia, one other little tip that I really just wanted to share real quick with Ask specifically, because again, with prompting, there's a little bit more effort in terms of, okay, if I'm going to set this up and how I want to ask it, so on and so forth. The nice thing with Ask too is it saves all those prompts for you. So none of the time is wasted. So you could have a really, really good prompt like, oh man, I love this one. Great. You can reference it later. It will be saved in your Ask. So just a little helpful tip and trick because I recently found that out and it was a game changer. So I just want to share that.
No, that's huge. Thank you. Perfect. Okay. So now we will pivot into AI Assistant. So AI Assistant, if you are not familiar with it, oh, someone asked, how do I save the prompts? It saves for you. Sorry, I'll do that real quickly. It saves for you on the left-hand side. You can see your history log of conversations, and then you can use your more options icon to rename the chat so you can go find it later. If we have time, I can show that. But yeah, good tool. Okay, now pivoting into AI Assistant. So if you're not familiar with AI Assistant, that is going to be existing in your response projects. It also lives in the content library, but it's primarily used in your response projects as a way to create a net new response to a question or to modify an existing response that's in your project. When I say AI Assistant today, I'm also factoring in AI Draft. I know those are technically two separate tools, but for the purpose of prompting, they operate the same way. They're really just taking the question in your project and then trying to find a response, and then you can modify that response based on whatever your needs are for that particular project. We've listed AI Assistant as an intermediate level prompting skill required. When we think about AI Assistant, the first half of that formula we discussed, which is what do I need to know? How do I need to know it? The first question is already taken care of. So that's something you don't have to necessarily think about when you're using AI Assistant, which should make it easier. However, that how do I need to know it is where that prompting skill is going to come in handy. So for that formula, the what do I need to know, that's the question in your project. That's the part of the prompt that you don't have to necessarily apply. But the how do I need to know it, that's going to come in with the AI Assistant instructions that you give. And that can be done at multiple levels. It can be done by the super admin in your organization settings. It can be done in your projects at the project settings level. So if you want to apply one prompt to the entire project, you can. It can be done at the section level via AI Draft. So while you're running AI Draft, you can put an instruction section by section if you need to respond to those differently. And then, of course, it could be done at the question level when you're engaging with, which is what our screenshot is here, when you're engaging with AI Assistant in your little right navigation pane. That's where you can include additional instructions. Now, when we think about instructions we want to give at different levels, it'll change. So if I'm trying to leave instructions at the organization settings level, for instance, something to factor in is it should not be hyper-specific. Unless you're truly responding to projects the exact same way every single time, then we don't necessarily want to say, hey, at an organization level, make sure you're using a security tone and make sure that we're hyping it up in a sales way or something. Like, you don't want to necessarily apply that broad rule set to all of your projects. So when we think about organization settings, we may want to add in some company branding. That's important for our team to use when they're using AI, and they're not necessarily going to be trying to engage with instructions as well. Again, organization settings, AI instructions, if you're looking and you're an admin and you don't see it, it's only available for super admins. We have added some additional prompts there as well, which is exciting, that kind of help guide you on how you should be setting up those that prompting. So I encourage you to take a look at that if you are a super admin. But that's what you should consider at the organization level. At the project level, it makes a little bit more sense to go ahead and apply some broad AI instructions that are like what I said. If it's a security questionnaire, keep responses short, keep them concise, keep them direct. If it's to a marketing firm, make it fun, make it fluffy. Those are things you can apply at the project level, so your team doesn't have to necessarily think about adding that as an instruction as they work in the project. And then it just goes down from there. You can tailor more to the section or more to the question. The lower level prompt is going to override the higher level prompt. So if you apply an instruction at your question level, then whatever you put there may override. If it completely contradicts your organization settings, then it'll override it just by the nature of how it should operate. For that reason specifically, you don't necessarily want that broad instruction on that hyper-specific question. An AI assistant, this is where COAST really comes in handy. It's where you're going to use it the most, that COAST structure that Phil discussed earlier. That COAST structure isn't, you don't have to make sure you check all of the boxes when you're building a prompt. You don't have to have the context and the audience and the style tone and they don't all have to be included. It's more of a guide for you to say, okay, do I have some context I need to apply? Do I have an objective I want to include? And then from there, you can build your prompt for AI assistant. Now, I will say this tool is probably my favorite thing about responsive users is that a lot of you aren't afraid to try to break the tool. That's what we say all the time, break the tool. It won't break. Trial and error as much as you can. And I know that a lot of you have spent the last year trying to break AI assistant and prompting and seeing what works and what doesn't. If you have specific prompts that you love that are working really well for you, please throw them in the chat. I know a lot of people will find a lot of value and help there, and we'll aggregate those prompts and we can share them in the community later, but please share what's working for you. What works at a broad level is really that COAST structure. There are some times you can go outside of the box and ask it to do different things that don't fall in that COAST structure, and they may or may not work. That's where that trial and error comes in. But for the sake of good prompting every time, what's certainly going to work, it's going to live in that COAST structure of the context, objective, audience, style, and constraints. But that's AI assistant. That's why it's a little bit more intermediate. Like I said, the ask was simple. Just ask it a question, have fun. AI assistant is where you truly want to be a little bit more in the weeds with making sure that prompt is working for whatever output you're trying to get. Now we're pivoting into something harder. And then we'll go back to light in a second, I promise. But the next level of prompting is going to come in Agent Studio. If you are unfamiliar with Agent Studio, it's essentially our tool that we've created where you can create your own agents in responsive. If you're like, what the heck is an agent, Marcia? We did a whole session on that. I encourage you to look at that coffee chat from a while ago. But the idea of an agent at a very broad level is that it's trying to complete tasks for you so that you're not spending so much time doing them. And with Agent Studio in particular, where you're going to find a lot of value in that is with content generation, data analysis, things like that, that live within your project workflow that you haven't necessarily done in responsive before, but now you can use responsive to achieve those tasks for you. The idea behind Agent Studio and why this is advanced is because you will spend a little bit of time building that agent on the front end, and it may take a few tries, and you're going to have to, think through it really strategically and maybe carve a day out for it. But in the long run, you're going to be spending less time doing the tasks that are associated with that agent. So work on the front end so you have ease on the back end. And when we talk about building agents and what's so hard about it, it's essentially all prompting. There are 3 steps of prompts that live within building that agent where you're doing a variation of prompting along the way. Now, pause. I know a lot of you are probably, if you've just started Agent Studio, you're probably in the phase where you're like, I don't even know where to begin or what agents to create. We have some examples listed here, but also our implementation team, specifically the absolutely lovely Kimberly Barra and Kristen Kane, we love them, big fans on the Academy, have pulled together a few agents and prompts that have worked for them and their customers, and we have that in the Docs tab. So if you go in the Docs tab and you see a little thing called Check Out Our Agent Studio Templates, that was done in partnership with our implementation team. Again, Kimberly and Kristen were super helpful with that, but they pulled together ideas and also prompts that you can start to try so you can start building your agents. But let's talk a little bit about the prompting associated. So like I said, it's a 3-part build with Agent Studio. The first step is going to be that initial build. Now, this is when you go into Agent Studio and you say, I want to create a new agent. You don't even have to say that. It's just a box on the screen. And essentially what you're doing here is just saying what agent you want to build. You don't have to necessarily be super detailed here. However, the more specific and detailed you can be at this first level, the easier time you're going to have down the road when you're developing the agent further in the next step. So you could just throw in there for the example that I think we'll use today, which is a clarification agent. Let's say I want this clarification agent to look through an RFP that I just got. I want it to parse through the questions and let me know if there's anything that might cause clarification issues down the road in my projects, so I can get those questions over to the issuer before we get started, so we're not having to run into those bottlenecks in the project process, which is an idea that either Kimberly or Krista came up with, blew my mind, awesome idea. But let's say that's what we want. I don't want to use the word lazy, but if we take the lazy approach, for lack of a better term, I could go into Agent Studio and say, build me a clarification agent that looks at my RFP and tells me if there's anything that doesn't make sense. I could just say that. And then from there, it'll do its best to try it, and it will work. It'll just take a few back and forth. Okay, what prompt actually works here? What do I want from the output? You could take that approach. Or you can just be a little bit more detailed. You can say, give it a scenario of, this is the situation I'm in. I just received this proposal. I'm looking to see, what does a clarification mean to you? What is your definition of a clarification? What are some examples you don't understand? Adding all of that context in at the initial build, at the initial request, is going to make sure that when you go down and you build out the templates for it and everything in the next steps, you're in a good spot. Do you see why I said this one's advanced? By the way, it's not as simple as ASK. But that's that first step. So you have the lazy version, just kind of saying what agent you want. And then you have the little bit more complex version, taking some time to really describe what your vision is with this agent. In the second step, it's going to build you a full coast structure based on what you said. So you enter in what you want, you click submit, and then it goes ahead and processes a longer prompt for you to evaluate. Now, when you see a screen with a ton of text that you have to read through, and then you see a shiny next button, and you don't see a barrier to clicking that next button, meaning there's nothing required of you, you can just say, looks good, and pop to the next screen. It is very tempting to just say, yeah, I'm sure they understood what I wanted. Let me move on. I will lightly push back and say, please make sure that before you hit that next button and approve that coast structure that's been written, you read through it, because it is an open text box that you can engage with and update the prompt within it. It's following that coast structure, the exact same one we talked about with AI Assistant. It's just a lot tougher and a lot fuller because it's looking at building an agent versus just trying to update a response in your project. When you read through it, just make sure that what it's saying aligns with your vision. If it doesn't, you can edit it. If you don't want to use the coast structure at all, you can completely wipe out the coast structure that it gave you and put in new instructions for it instead. That's kind of part of again, we can go the lazy route and just look at what it curated for us and say, yep, this is good, or make tweaks and move on. Or you can be proactive and build a larger instruction that you populate into that field for it. There's also now a little modify button. You can use AI to update what AI said for you to help kind of navigate how you want those instructions to be set as. So you can play with that as well, but it's a don't miss step. It does require additional prompting. It's just more intense prompting, but that is really going to be the core of what generates with your AI agent at the end of it. On that same page, you have the template, and that's what I've put as step 2. It's on the same page, but it's kind of a separate way to look at prompting. Now, in responsive, we use the word template a lot, and it can mean a lot of things. For me, when I first heard it, that we were doing this for Agent Studio, I was like, great, we get to apply styles and formats to our agents. That is not what this template is. It is not a response template. When we say an Agent Studio template, we're specifically talking about the structure that you want the output to be from the agent. So for our example of the clarifications, do you want it to retain the original proposal and highlight something and then mark it and then put what doesn't make sense with the explanation? How do you want that generation to look from the agent is what you're going to place in the template. And it'll be in a Word document or a DocX document that you have. But that's all you're giving it. You're not telling it how you want it to look. It won't pick that up. You're strictly telling it, okay, this is what I want the end result to be structured as. These are the headings that I want. You can even say, I want this section to be a bulleted list, and then tell it how many bullets you want and what's in those bullets. So for a separate example, if we're doing a market trends analysis with our Agent Studio, I can say I want trend 1, trend 2, trend 3. And then I can have another section where I say, okay, now I want you to show where our strengths and weaknesses are. And you can very clearly pinpoint exactly how you want that document to look. But that is what you're placing in the template. It's another optional step. You don't have to include a template. You can just let responsive do its thing every time you run your agent. And it'll have similar outputs every time based on what you've put in that first step. But if you have a specific output that you're looking for, that template is going to be super helpful. When you upload the template, we have our next step of, we could just say accept and move on, but please don't do that anytime you're doing this. The more work you put up front, the better result you'll have at the end. When you upload the template, you'll have a screen that shows the original document and the structure it pulled. The original document is just showing what you've uploaded, which if you look at that, you're like, great, yeah, that's what I said. Click the structure tab and just make sure that whatever you uploaded was picked up by responsive and it understood what you meant. That's where you can see, okay, that's what the output's going to be whenever I generate this AI agent. So just some tips there for the initial build and then the template. And then finally, we have the agent launch. So once you've done all of that work of putting in your initial request, making sure that co-structure and the instructions are crystal clear, and then including that template, you're all set. Easy, right? That was so simple. You'll obviously add where it can look and who can access it, but that's not prompting. That agent will be available in ASK, and then you can launch it. Once you launch it, your prompting work is not done. It can be another optional step, but you do have the ability post-agent launch to apply further instructions to say, okay, include this now, or tweak this section to say this. So you can still continue to iterate with those prompts and the agent launch. They're not going to be nearly as intensive as step 1 and 2, but you do have that capability at the end of the Agent Studio cycle. Now, that was a lot of information about Agent Studio, but truly, it seems scary. And I know I just talked about it for, I think, 10 minutes. Probably still seems a little scary, but it's not. It's really just flexing those prompting muscles. It's a good way if you have access to Agent Studio and you're like, I want to get started with prompting. I don't know where to start. You can't break responsive. If you just start trying to build an agent and figuring out what works best, that's honestly a really great playground to figure out how do I prompt and to experiment with prompts and how you're speaking with AI. It's a great ecosystem for that. I think it's fun.
I love it. Just to bookend it, because I agree, that was a lot. It was very, very good. I'm going to drop the Academy course all about Agent Studio because yeah, hearing all this is great, but walking through it, very, very helpful. But Marcia, really what I'm hearing you say is it's a cry once scenario, meaning you're going to do some of that heavy lifting on the front end, but everything else afterwards going to be chef kiss, smooth sailing afterwards.
That's the idea. You may
Love
have
it.
to trial and error a couple times, but yeah, the
Of
better
course.
you can build
Build
that
that.
prompting on the front end, the
Yeah.
happier you're going to be in the long end. And again, all steps of Agent Studio building, it is just prompting, prompting, prompting. It is nothing more than prompting and you telling the Agent Studio or responsive AI agents what to do. So like you're on vacation and if you're a sassy vacationer and you just tell the staff that's what you're doing, except with Agent Studio. And it doesn't have feelings, so it's not that bad.
It is pretty fun to actually mess around with too. So we encourage you to do that. Make a couple agents and yeah, really experience it. So good,
Yeah,
Marcia, though.
thank you. Okay. We have our final one. I told you it would get a little bit easier after this. So we went from simple, intermediate, really advanced, and now we're going to come back like right here. So not fully simple, but kind of back down. And that's with our MCP server. MCP server is a scary term. All that means is that you've connected responsive to ChatGPT, Claude, or Copilot. So whatever AI chat tool you're using outside of responsive, you can add responsive as a knowledge base so it can populate information for you. It works really well if you're just doing a content search. So that's where that simple level is coming in. If you're really just kind of like, I don't have time to log into responsive and open up Ask, you can use it the same way. You can say, hey, look here, the filtering's not there yet. So again, if that's important to you, go to Ask. But you can effectively just ask it a question that exists in your knowledge base and it can grab it for you. You can also generate more narrative content with it based on your knowledge base, which will be a little bit more advanced. And you can also pull project insights from it. So that's a powerful tool that does not exist in Ask right now that you can do within the ChatGPT, Claude, or Copilot ecosystem when you've connected that MCP server. That's very exciting. I have some examples to try right there, but let's go into the FAQs really quickly and talk a little bit more about what that means. So when I say it can access your projects, yes, it can access your projects, but it can't access everything in your projects. When I say you can pull project insights, I mean it can pull your current project statuses, it can identify bottlenecks or uneven workload balances, and it can provide recommendations for next steps. And when we think about how that works, it's in that two-part, it's kind of like the two-part prompting. It's the two-part workflow for the MCP connection. All responsive is doing is providing the information for it. And then the engine that you're using is curating the information for you in the way that you ask it. So if you want an executive level snapshot, it's pulling your responsive information. That's the responsive piece, but it's using its own solution to build that executive level snapshot for you. So it's that two-part workflow. And that prompting is how you're going to get what you want. It's a little bit more like Ask, where it's more of an intuitive workflow because it is a chat feature. So for instance, if I go into ChatGPT and I say, show me my project status list and identify bottlenecks for me, it can pull me a really nice list of all of my projects and then say, hey, here's some areas you might need to improve. If I want to take that and then say, okay, now give me an executive level snapshot that I can share with my leadership team, I just have to send that and then it'll pull it. And then you can just go back and forth until you get the end result that you're looking for. Every time you do that, that's all prompting. So again, we think about Agent Studio, we're like, this is so complicated. Just think about how easy it is to chat back and forth with ChatGPT. That's all you're doing in Agent Studio. It's just not talking back to you necessarily when you're building it. So ChatGPT, the prompting is really just saying exactly what you want. You want to be specific, especially with that project status information, so that it's pulling exactly what you're looking for. Maybe not extra information or, it doesn't forget something, but that initial prompt will be what you get. And then you can go from there to curate more information. Same thing if you're just trying to get a narrative generation of an executive summary or something. You just have to say specifically what you're looking for. Maybe give an example of another version that you've done before, and then it can plug it in for you just like it does when you use ChatGPT regularly. I will say it's pretty cool. It tells you exactly, in ChatGPT anyway, but it tells you exactly how it's working. So when you put your request in, it says, I am looking through your projects right now. Like it gives you a kind of a play-by-play, which is really fun. But the use of ChatGPT with prompting is fairly intuitive when it comes to engaging, and especially when we look at prompting with AI Assistant and prompting with Agent Studio, it's not nearly as complex trying to pull information because you can go back and forth. If you want a good output on the front end, just make sure you're being specific with your request and telling it exactly what you want. So the example I said to try is show me my active project list, then identify bottlenecks and red flags, and provide an executive summary and an easy to read table. From there, it'll do all of the things for you, and then it'll end it with a table, provide suggestions of where you can improve things, all of that good stuff. But I think I'm leaving just about 15 minutes here for us to maybe answer questions or share information. Phil, do you want to, or I can, I'll open it right now. I just went over a lot of different tools just now. We are curious to know which tools you'd like more prompting information on, if it's Ask AI Assistant, Agent Studio, MCP Server. So I've gone ahead and opened a poll for you all. If you want to engage with that, that'd be awesome so we can know where to direct our resources later. But as we wrap up, as you're engaging with that poll, the key takeaways from today, there's a lot of information we talked about, a lot of different tools we talked about. Mostly just make sure you're being specific. Make sure you're applying filters. I know that's not necessarily what we spent a lot of our time on today, but those filters are going to be impactful. AI doesn't work well unless it knows where to search. So just make sure you're taking the time to curate your information, like Phil said earlier, and use trial and error. The more you use prompting, the better you'll get at it in the long run. But sometimes you just have to try things and see if they work. You're not going to break anything, especially in responsive. So just make sure that you're going in, you're giving prompts a go, and then iterating where you need to, and then saving the prompts that are working so that way you don't have to do it again later. Phil, do you have anything to add there?
No, I think that was great. I will say, yeah, you can't break a responsive, but I know I have some eager users on this call who are like, yes, I can. And in that case, share it with us. Our product team, they're incredible and very, very open to all the feedback that we get. So we encourage you, yeah, run it through its paces. That's really what we're trying to get across, is run it through its paces, see where the end of the table is, if you will, your fall off point. So then we can further address it, make it better, and evolve the product as it should. So I'm in ChatGPT today. So I know some of you may have Copilot. You can add Copilot and talk to your CSM about it, but we're working in ChatGPT today. So I just already pulled an example of, hopefully you're familiar with the ChatGPT window, of give me a list of project statuses and identify any bottlenecks. So exactly what I said. It gave me a quick synopsis of what it's doing, which is really nice. I mean, it could just kind of throw something at me, but it's pretty thoughtful. And then it did exactly what I asked. So it was able to pull that project status list. Now, I will say it's pretty, I don't want to say limited, but it doesn't necessarily pull everything in your projects. So I can't see how much time was spent from like the perspective of the counter that lives in every project. So I can't tell you like down to the minute how much time was spent, but it can do things like calculate when the project was created to today and give you that information. So ideally just play around with maybe some of the different requests that you have in terms of data with projects to see what works. But it gives me the projects that we have open. It tells me their status, where we're at. And then it gives me my bottlenecks and concerns, which is super helpful. Then it gives me a breakdown and it tells me, okay, here's some executive briefings. I'm sure the executives will know exactly what that number is. I'm just kidding, you can always erase it. But that's why we read when AI sends us things. But it gives leadership actions as well. So it really does pull all of this information, and then it gives guidance, which is really nice. That's kind of the added benefit of ChatGPT versus maybe using Ask, is that it can give advice using the ChatGPT server to say, okay, like maybe this is where you can make some changes to improve your process so that you can push this one along further. And then just like before, it gives me my sources. It's not opening it, it's just my projects, but it will, if you're doing a content search, link out all of your sources from responsive as well. And I know I'm looking through responsive because I have it connected with my company knowledge here.
We have the course on MCP Server or ChatGPT in the Docs tab. Please review that. That'll walk you through how to connect it, how to start the conversation in ChatGPT. But just so you can see, this is what it looks like. And then if I wanted, I can ask it to do something else by typing down here. In my last 2 minutes, which is not enough time for Agent Studio, but just so I can quickly kind of recap everything I covered. So when I was talking about that initial request that comes in, I was talking about this menu. So if you're not familiar with responsive or you're new, Agent Studio lives in its own little panel here. So that's how I got to this page. If I'm going to just go ahead and use one of the examples that was given by our lovely implementation team and put my initial prompt in right here. I just copied and pasted, but I essentially just said, you are an expert proposal strategist and bid manager supporting this, like blah, blah, blah. This is what I'm looking for. So I told it what it's doing and how it's trying to do it. So here is where I entered in that initial prompt. So I said here, I just said, you're an expert proposal strategist and bid manager. This is where I entered that initial one in. Then it'll take me to the next page where I can add a description. And then that next page, which I think we're going to get cut off before we see it, but that's where you'll add in the fuller context and then the template. So that's kind of how you get started. You want to give that initial prompt there. Then on the following steps, that's where you'll kind of continue that momentum. So here I can give more description if I want, but then it pulled those instructions for me. This is where I'll want to read through it and make sure it's what I want. I can completely remove it and put my own thing, and then I can add my sample file or my template here.
Marcia, great work. Thanks everyone for being on the call today. We hope to see you at the next one, and be sure to be at June Certification Month. Have a good one.
Thanks everyone.